Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to cover, now that Anthony's covered the overall requirements and whether or not you come within the requirement of the CRD to file the report, how do you complete, what information do you need to gather, and how do you complete the report, prepare and complete the report? There are 6 categories, actually 4 categories of information that you will need. The first one is you will assign each employee who is within who are within the snapshot period of all of those employees. For each one, you're going to be assigning them to one of these 10 job categories. After you assign them to the job category, you will then be reporting the employees' race and sex. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. There's a lot more information about this on the FAQs of the CRD's website that gives you additional information. So for each employee, you will, after you determine which job category they're in, you will be determining their race and sex. And this is the 7 categories according to which you will be assigning the employees to their race and ethnicity categories. After that, now, as far as the CRD requires employers to report an employee according to one of the 7 race and ethnicity categories. And even if that information is not available on their employment records, you have to use other reliable sources to get the information, or even go based on the observer's perception. Now, the last method, which is the observer's perception of what the employee's race and ethnicity is, should be used after making a good faith effort to obtain that information from the employee or from other reliable sources. The only exception to not reporting the employee's race and also for sex is for labor contractor employee reports covering the 2022 reporting year. The CRD is permitting the employers to report unknown for race and ethnicity for any labor contractor employee when the information is indeed unknown or not reasonably obtainable prior to the filing deadline. This basically means that the CRD will defer enforcement of these requirements, but employers and labor contractors should not expect that this option will be available in the future. And I would recommend that employers and labor contractors should implement plans to obtain accurate information from employees for the subsequent reporting years. And then after that, as far as the determining the employee's sex, California officially recognizes 3 genders, male, female, and non-binary, and employers should report the employees according to these categories. Employee says self-identification is the preferred method. And then if you can't determine, then it would be to the extent the employee declines to state, the employer must still report the employee according to one of the 3 categories using any information that's available. And I think this might be a little easier because you can always go by the employee's self-identified pronoun. And again, the same exception here applies for labor contractor employees. After you've determined that, then you will be assigning the employees to a pay band. And for the reporting year 2022, the employees will be assigned to one of the 12 pay bands. And this will be determined based on what their earnings were for the reporting year. After you've gathered that information, then how do you determine if the particular pay band in which to count the employee? So the CRD states that the employer shall calculate the total earnings as shown on the IRS Form W-4 for each employee. And the employers must use box number 5, which includes Medicare wages and tips for the entire reporting year. There may be some employees who have no reported income on box 5. So in that case, you can use box 1 and clarify that in the clarifying remarks field on the report that's submitted for that particular category. Moving on, employers should not annualize. So if an employee did not work for the entire year and their yearly salary, for example, was $100,000, but her W-2 box 5 income is $50,000, the employee should be counted, that employee should be counted in the pay band encompassing 50,000, not 100,000. So it's the actual earnings, not what her yearly salary would have been in terms of what pay band you will be assigning the employee to. The next thing is you will be calculating the employee's total hours. How do you determine the employee's total hours worked? For non-exempt employees, obviously employers should utilize the timesheets or any other records to calculate the actual hours. That should also include the hours the employee was on any form of paid time off. And then for exempt employees, to the extent that there are records kept, obviously the total hours worked would be included, would be counted based on the records that you may have on the exempt employees. And to the extent that you don't have records on exempt employees, which is probably generally the case, employers can use a proxy formula, which means that calculating each exempt employee's total hours worked by multiplying the total number of days actually worked during the year. So this year, this reporting period, we're talking about the year 2022. You will be multiplying the total number of days worked during 2022 plus the total number of days on any form of paid leave, vacation time by the average number of hours worked per day by the employee. If you have records, let's say you have some exempt employees for whom the employer is keeping records and some that the employer is not keeping records, then you'd be using the records for those that you have records on to track the hours. And for those that you don't have any records, you would be using the proxy formula. Again, there is no set proxy formula, that requires employers to calculate the hours. If a labor contractor employee has worked for more than one client over the course of the calendar year, their hours worked would be allocated respectively to each client based on the hours work performed for that particular client. Now, going back to calculating the average number of hours worked for exempt employees, you can determine that by using a reasonable estimation based on available information. For example, a reasonable estimation may be 8 hours worked for a full-time exempt employee and 4 hours for part-time exempt employee.